Okay. You guys see the screen, real estate tips, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Um, my name is Hector Perez. I'm a real estate agent with Better Homes and Gardens. And the headline for today is Real Estate Tips Through This Market, the spring market. I'm going to talk about real estate concepts for first time home sellers as well as second time home buyers. So we're getting ready to sell and then we're getting ready to buy. New Jersey licensed, Pennsylvania licensed. Hector Perez, once again, with Better Homes and Gardens. I speak Spanish. There goes my smile. I specialize in first time home sellers, appreciation, and how we allocate our funds. So I think it's important to talk about not just the fact that there's going to be equity in our home and maybe now is a time to sell, but also what we can do with those funds. Appreciation is going to be the increase in value over a period of time. The rise over the last 5 years in New Jersey. Home values in New Jersey have risen 49.1% over the last 5 years, 8.6 increase in home value over just this past year. Talking a little bit now about home inspections. Depending on how long we've had our home, I truly believe if it's over 10 years, a pre-listing home inspection before we're getting ready to sell might be a good idea. There might be something that we're unaware of, hidden defects. Maybe there's water damage, termite problems, or something that we are unaware of. So it's a good thing to do to check the current home conditions of the property. I actually met with Curbio last month in Philadelphia. They had a seminar in person. And one beautiful thing about Curbio, the company, is that they deal with repairs. And through your inspection, you can give them through the Curbio app all the inspection report, and they can give you an itemized repair list. With Curbio, you can pay them at closing. So if you're like, hey, there's a lot of things in my house that I want to fix and I don't have the money for it, you can list your home and pay them at closing. I think that's a really awesome idea that you can go with. So let's talk a little bit about as we're getting ready to list our home, we need to CMA, or I'm going to call it a current market value, where we're going to check out the property and see what we can list it at. Also, when we are going to list with an agent, we need to get a listing agreement. It's negotiable. We can talk about agent compensations, what we're going to be compensating the listed agent, as well as if we're going to be compensating the buyer's agent. And that can be discussed at a later time, one-on-one. So one thing I want to say is as we are getting that current market value, a lot of sellers are going to be looking at Zillow. It's not going to be a Zillow Z estimate. An agent who has experience is going to actually go see the property as well as do their little computer research on homes sold in the area, close in radius, similar square footage, similar bedrooms, and similar bathrooms. So that's going to give us a range as well as seeing the actual property. And then we can discuss what we would list the home at. As we are getting ready to list, we are going to get tons of offers, right? And we're going to get under contract. As we're in that process of, selling our home and we're under contract, we're possibly going to sell 6, 7, 8 weeks or whatever have you. We need to also be buying a home at the same time, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that and what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my job. So my job is going to be to educate, communicate, call, text, email, follow up. Also going to be looking at the stats. In terms of the property that we're going to look at, there's a lot of numbers that are going to be involved. What our closing check is going to look like. That's some of the stats, as well as what we're going to look to purchase after that. And once again, from the beginning, how we're going to allocate all those funds. I definitely don't suggest having a closing check of 100,000 after we've sold our home and using up all those funds on that next property. I think we need to get smart and really come up with a game plan of how we're going to spread that money out. You don't want to be house poor, right? So as we are getting ready to buy, there's going to be a buyer's agreement that we have to sign. Also, I definitely think we should get a pre-approval, right? So we can work together. And before we go to see properties, we could always talk about compensation and commission for that transaction. It's negotiable. We could talk about that one-on-one. I do have Matt Brady with Maximus Mortgage who's going to talk about the loan pre-approval, but here's a little bit of my gist on it. It's going to let you know how much you can borrow, and it's going to set your budget for that whole buying process. You need to know what you can afford. You need to know that mortgage number so you can look at homes off of those numbers. I think it's everything. Everyone says, "Hey, I need a realtor," but I think when we're buying, one of the first things that we need to do is speak to a lender and figure out, what's our numbers, what we can afford, and what we can get pre-approved for. I think it's everything. As we speak to a lender and get that pre-approval, we can start looking at homes. There goes a picture of my house as we're fixing up the roof in Sicklerville. So we need to figure out where we want to live, what township, what we can afford, bedrooms, bathrooms, floors. My particular home is a rancher, one floor, and I really love that. As we have found our dream home and that next property, we need to make an aggressive offer. I got a track athlete on here thinking about it like it's an open competition, it's an open race. If there's a home that you desire, the fact of the matter is there's going to be probably another 10, 20 people who also are going to be looking and loving that home too. That particular home could easily receive 10 offers. So we need to make an aggressive offer. And that's the emails, information of all the panel members, and I'll send that over at the end of this webinar for everyone to see. And that is my spiel. I am going to now send it over to Matt Brady with Maximus Mortgage Advisors, and he can give more news. Batter up.
Thanks, Hector. I appreciate you having me here. So far, very good presentation. Did an excellent job. And yeah, you asked me to focus in on your topics of, first-time home sellers and going to purchase again. Well, that's part of the problem in this market is that we're seeing is a lot of sellers don't want to sell because they have 2-3% interest rate. House values have gone up significantly. So not only is the house more, they're paying, a lot more because the interest rate, I mean, that difference in interest rate, we say is like a Range Rover payment, except you don't even get the Range Rover. So that's the issue with, part of the low inventory. There's also been, less and less building over the years. That's been going on for a while. But I think, as far as me, I try to get sellers to look at a different mind state, even with refinancing. I have clients where, again, they don't want to let go of that 3% interest rate, but they got $50,000, $75,000 in other debt with a much higher interest rate. I gave examples. I just put out a video of, how she did go from a 3% to a 7%, but overall her debt for monthly payments was, $600 less a month because we paid off, credit cards and a car. So, even though now the mortgage is higher, her overall debt that she's paying monthly is lower. And I think it's sometimes hard for people to see that. I think, just maybe a lack of knowledge or understanding. And a lot of times they fixate on rate, even prior to this, where rates were normal. Clients always tend to just fix it. Well, what's the rate? Well, what's the rate? right? When like you compare FHA to conventional, FHA typically has lower rates, but that doesn't mean it costs you less money in the long term, because FHA has mortgage insurance for the whole 30 years, whereas conventional, it goes away. So, I try to get people look at the big picture and bottom line dollars of, not just thinking, oh, but what's my rate? What am I paying there? So, I think if we help change that mindset, we'll see more listings. And if rates do come down, then we'll definitely see more listings. But when that happens, my prediction is that when rates come down, house values are going to go up again. Because you have all these buyers and still the inventory is not going to catch up, still going to be low, basic supply and demand, house values are going to go up. So, that's why I try to teach people or, suggest to them that they buy now with the higher rate. You could always refinance. I'm waiving my bank fees for any of my clients, when it comes time to refinance. That's simple enough, but you can't go back and renegotiate the house price. If you buy it now for 350 at a 7% rate, well, you could always drop the rate. But if you buy it, later at 400,000 with 5% interest rate, well, there's no going and changing that and getting that 50,000 back. So, I think that's part of it now. Rates, as far as rates go, they don't seem to be moving much. They've been pretty flat for a while now, little movements up and down. Sometimes when we have data, we just had jobs report or, when stuff like that comes out, there'll be a little bit movement, but then it seems to steady back out and go back down. The Fed is still saying that they are committed to 3 rate cuts this year, but we're running out of time. So I don't know exactly when they'll start doing those, because I also think they shouldn't do, back to back to back so soon. So we'll see. I mean, my prediction is maybe, June, they'll do the first rate cut. We'll see, hopefully a little significant change and go from there. As far as sellers, back to sellers selling their home in this market, it is still very competitive. One thing that I do and offer to my clients is we have a type of bridge loan. So it'll actually help remove the contingency on the sale of your home. Because that's a major problem when people are selling, trying to buy and put an offer in. Well, they're contingent on selling their home, and the 8 other people that put an offer on that home are not. So what this does is it gives you the cash out of that equity that you have. It builds in 6 months mortgage payments. So that way, if you do close on that home, you're not paying 2 mortgages at once. And that way it does remove the mortgage contingency. So you're not technically carrying 2 mortgages at once. Helps give you the money for the down payment and closing costs to buy the house. If you sell the house, then you can always, apply it towards that one, any other proceeds that you get. But that's been a great option, help that competitive advantage. That way it doesn't look like they're, dependent on selling a home, because that tends to be a little more the easier part. It's getting into that home, and getting that offer accepted that we're seeing there. Other ways just to be competitive, we'll submit the file for what's called TBD underwriting, where essentially the file is underwritten like it was under contract already. That way when you go to put an offer in, you have an actual commitment letter that's really only saying that, as long as title's good, appraisal's good, they're going to get this loan. So that's something that's been helpful as far as that as well. But yeah, we'll see what the future holds. I mean, just hopefully those rates do tick down. People will be more comfortable listing. I did also hear something in the talks with the IRS being more lenient on the capital gains when coming to sell a home. I think they were doing that to try to initiate, sellers to list more and take advantage of some of that equity. And I think to your point, like you said too, yeah, definitely take advantage of that equity, and there's a lot of people that, are older now, retired, maybe downsize, buy a smaller home, put away some of that money for, retirement, bills, emergencies, whatever have you. Just did that as well, with the client, put 100 down, had 50,000 left over for just spending. And secure now, even though the monthly payment was higher, she now has $50,000 as a cushion, so she doesn't feel the stress and pressure of that. So with that, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like me to touch on, but yeah, we'll see, kind of what the spring market holds a little more. It did pick up a little bit, but I think with, spring break here, a lot of people are home on vacation, so it slowed down a little bit. But I think it's really going to be dependent on rates. That and hopefully more construction would happen to, alleviate the inventory.
So before
Sounds
we
good.
go any further, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of you and
Absolutely.
Hector, Matt. Um, for one thing, Hector touched on inspections, home inspections, and that's really the other gentleman's kind of thing. But just to go back, do you recommend that, people get a home inspection before they buy? I know you said the 10 years, if it's like 10 years, that's something that you should get. But on the seller side, generally people don't do that. Do you suggest that they do that as a seller and as a buyer?
Depending on how long they've had the property. Um, my brother-in-law has a property for the last 20 years, but
Hmm.
he's never lived in it. So it's
Okay.
tenant occupied. So
Uh-huh.
he has absolutely no clue on
Right.
any conditions of the property. So I
Right.
told him to get a pre-listing inspection, and he did. And we have to disclose that on the property disclosure sheet.
Right.
My broker told me to remember not to forget that little tidbit. But so yeah, we have a home. We don't really have an understanding of it. It's happened twice already, where the seller doesn't really know what's going on with the home. And the first time we did not get an inspection, and when the buyer got an inspection, there was a slew of items and defects and repair requests. I would say about 15, and a lot of them the sellers were unaware of it. So it was hard to get an estimate and to figure out, how much are these repairs going to be, and are we going to credit them? And for that situation, they also didn't get an inspection when they bought it. Their agent did not advise them well. It was an as is property, and they were like, "Hey, it's as is, so who cares? Let's not get an inspection." And that was a major negative that occurred. So from those experiences, and depending on how long you've had the property and how well you've maintained it, I think it's a good idea. If you have an understanding, if you have a good gauge, if you know your property, you maintain it, maybe not.
Right, right. And and can actually impact the sales price, isn't that right?
Yeah, I think when we're listing the property, yeah, it looks great on paper, and then
Right,
once we start getting this inspection report and this all these items that possibly could be defects and repairs might be needed, maybe the whole roof is shot up. That could be $10,000.
right.
So it would affect the listing price. So
Mhm.
for certain situations, I would advise it. Certain situations, no.
The one other thing that I think the people who are listening should be really aware of is um, when you first list a property, Hector, there's on your listing agreement attached to that, there's a seller's disclosure statement. And how could that impact the sale of the property?
You know, whatever we know from the inspection report and from what we know from living there, we need to disclose that on that disclosure sheet. Um, so that's something that we need to sift through. It's like over 10 pages. So we have to take our time and write this detailed information on what we know about the roof, what we know with the plumbing, et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
But yeah,
right.
it's important. It's huge.
And a question for you, Matt. Were talking about some type of a loan. It was a bridge loan, and you said
Mhm.
something about FHA, and you said something about conventional. I'm aware of these things. However, a first-time home buyer may not understand like your lingo. So can you just give us a real quick breakdown of what an FHA mortgage is, what a conventional mortgage is, and what a bridge loan is? Just
Yep,
really quickly.
absolutely. There's really, well, let's say there's really five main loan types, right? You have your FHA, conventional, USDA, and VA. Your FHA, USDA, and VA are really government loans, government-backed programs, right? FHA and conventional are the most common. Um, FHA is again backed by the Federal Housing Authority. So there, the main difference is really in the mortgage insurance. And like I said, FHA has to have mortgage insurance for the full 30 years. But FHA was made to try to help, lower credit people, more loose guidelines. And that's why it tends to be associated as the first time homebuyer program, but it's not a first time homebuyer program. You can absolutely you get an FHA on your second home. There's some guidelines with that, but it's not specifically for first time homebuyers. Now, conventional is, you either have Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. They're more private. You get private mortgage insurance. They just tend to be a little bit more strict as far as credit. You typically don't want to do conventional, with credit scores less than a 700. You can technically go down to 620, but you're heavily going to pay for it because they're, very impacted by your credit score as far as interest rate and the mortgage insurance. Whereas FHA, if you have a low credit, you're not going to see too much crazy movement on the interest rate. And for the mortgage insurance, it's the same for everybody. So, but again, typically first-time home buyers maybe have lower credit. They haven't built up, they're young, they're just starting out. So a lot of times we will go with FHA. And then there's, different programs that fall underneath that.
Mm-hmm.
There is first-time home buyer programs. The state of New Jersey has the NJHMFA, PA has PHFA. But again, the first mortgage is still going to be one of your FHA, VA, USDA, or conventional. But then they also, give you assistance or give you a lower market interest rate. So we've been doing a lot of those lately because, with the cost of housing going up so much, a lot of those programs help alleviate those problems. New Jersey, you can get 10,000 to 15,000, depending on the county, plus an additional 7,000 if your parents don't own a home. And then the interest rates are a lot lower than, normal interest rates. One of those programs, the interest rate's 6.25, whereas, average mortgage rate, I have it right here, is, above 7%.
Right. Right.
So, we're doing a lot of those, help alleviate that. Those have been good. There are some caveats with that. You do have to stay in the house for 5 or 10 years, or else you owe that money back. You could also do those programs just for the lower interest rate and not get the assistance. And in which case you could sell or move whenever. But yeah, it's good to then take advantage of those lower interest rates.
That's good. That's really good information because people that are, just starting out, they don't know all about the ins and outs of this type of mortgage and that type of mortgage. And, you and Hector working together and, other people who are, mortgage people need to work really closely with the realtor in order to get the best deal for your clients. That's great, great news.
Thank you so much
I,
for
I just wanted to interject that because I know people don't understand kind of it's we think and I know I'm guilty of it too. I assume people understand like what I'm talking about sometimes, and then I find out, wait a minute, they didn't even get from part A to point B because they don't understand. So
right.
thanks for the information.
Absolutely. If
Go
I
ahead,
could actually
Hector.
just add one more thing,
Sure.
USDA, because that is not, really touched upon a lot. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are unaware of that program,
Right.
which is great because USDA allows for 0% down. So you don't have to
Right.
do a down payment for those loans.
Right.
Also, since it's government backed, interest rate's a little bit lower. Mortgage insurance is very, very minimum.
Good.
So that's a great program, especially if you do it in conjunction with one of the assistants. You could essentially walk in a house for nothing out of your pocket.
Beautiful. That's what they
Most
want
of
to
the
know.
Yeah, exactly. And most of New Jersey is USDA eligible. So it's for more rural areas. It's based on population. So you're not going to see it in places like, Trenton or, Cherry Hill, where it's very dense and populated. But the rest of New Jersey, when it's spread out in the suburbs, mostly USDA eligible. Thank you again, Vera.
You're welcome. Sorry, Hector, for jumping in there. I just wanted to be sure people are understanding what we're talking about. We don't want to talk over their heads. We want to be sure that they understand.
Sounds good to me. I'm going to now send it over to Angelos, Platinum Home Inspections. Take it away.
Thank you, Hector. Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Just want to talk to you a little bit about inspections, home inspections, and platinum home inspections. A little bit about my background. I've been inspecting going on 2.5 years. I'm the sole operator of platinum home inspections. There are no other inspectors within the company, so I'm pretty much handling all the inspections for the company. I am also a broker for 22 years, so I kind of know both sides of the transaction. I usually average about 60 transactions a year. So as you know, I've been on a lot of home inspections as well. So at any rate, when some of our services that we do offer at Platinum Home Inspections are obviously your standard commercial and residential home inspections. We do termite search, we do radon measurements, we do mold testing, which is air or surface or both. And we also are certified to do sewer scopes as well. Most of the time when you hear about a home inspection, you always 9 out of 10 times a buyer is usually ordering the inspection, and rightfully so, it should be the case. But many times you don't really hear too much about sellers ordering inspections, although it's just as important as if a buyer was ordering it. Obviously when you're going under contract, you're finishing up your attorney review period, you have a certain amount of time to get your inspection period in, and you kind of want to know like what exactly are the defects that come through the home inspection. As a home inspector, I always educate my clients and I always tell them, yes, you are getting a home inspection, but look at it as if it's more of a home education. By the time I'm done with this inspection, you're pretty much going to know everything about the house that you're looking to buy, whether defects, where's the main shutoff, where's the main shutoff for the gas, everything you could possibly imagine, how many amps your panel has, what receptacles need to be GFI protected, do we have active knob and tube wiring if it falls in certain time frame, which is like usually around 1960, everything. And when I go through the inspection process, it's not like I will go in there, say hello to my clients, and then see them at the end of the inspection. They are usually, and it's encouraged to walk around with me. That way they could be educated throughout the inspection to make them feel comfortable, make sure they know what they're getting themselves into and what they're buying. It makes the whole process go a lot smoother. And then, at the end, we'll do like a quick summary of all the findings, and then everything will be in the report, which is usually a 24-hour turnaround time of everything that we discussed. I feel like when I talk to the client during the inspection process, they seem to grasp the information a lot better than just reading the report itself. So it goes a long way, and it makes them feel very comfortable. And as agents who are the buyer's agents, they also enjoy that as well. At the end of the day, we want to make sure the client is protected, whether it's going through the home inspection process or the buying process with the agent, and get to the closing table. A lot of buyers these days, they'll go through these homes, they'll tour these homes with the agents, and they focus on the things like, example would be, oh, the kitchen is beautiful, the bedrooms are nice size, but they don't really focus on the age of the windows. They don't really focus on the age of the roof or how much is going to cost down the road. Is it going to be a money pit? So these are the things that we obviously have to break the news to them as inspectors. Hey, your roof is, on the older side, your windows on the older side, budget for newer windows, budget for newer roof. And, on my reports, I also do have like suggestions and recommendations. Like if I come across a home that has an older roof, yes, there may not be no leaks at the time of the inspection because it hasn't rained in 3-4 days. I'm going to suggest and recommend that they allocate funds for a newer roof down the road. Same goes for a heating system, same goes for an air conditioner or windows, etc. So it kind of gets them prepared to say, hey, budget for this because you may need it down the road. Nobody wants to be caught by surprise on a huge expense as if replacing a roof, which would cost $8,000 to $15,000 depending on the size, or a sewer line that needs to be replaced of that nature. So, it's always very, very important to get your home inspection, whether it's as is or not. In the contract, you are entitled to an inspection. So you should always get it, even though it is as is, you're still getting great value from it, especially good information about the property. You'll be surprised how many times I'll go on to an inspection and most of the clients are, I won't say clueless about the property, but almost. They don't even know where like the main water shutoff is. And these are important things. As home inspectors, we are required to let you know where the main water shutoff is, where the main gas shutoff is, how many amps in a panel. We are required. We are not required to get on roofs, believe it or not, although we exceed the standard of practice and we do get on roofs if it's safe, obviously. And, a lot of home buyers, they do appreciate that. And, at the end of the day, they're going to know everything that they need to know about this property. Will there be stuff that are missed? Yeah, there always is. Nobody's perfect. But at the end of the day, we need to point out the serious defects. And a lot of these serious defects can go unseen or unknown. Like, for example, how many clients would go in a basement, unfinished basement, and look at the foundation wall, see it heaving? I know when I bought my house, I wasn't looking at foundation walls. I was like, this kitchen is beautiful. Well, guess what? When I got an inspection done, you got a huge horizontal crack going across the foundation wall. That's a big no-no.
Yes.
It is fixable, it is very expensive, but most importantly, if you're going to go sell the house down the road, you may have a hard time selling it.
Right.
So you definitely should always consider doing the home inspection. At the very least, do the termite as well and do the radon if you have a basement. I always recommend doing radon on all properties, to be honest with you, basement or not. And then most importantly, if the house is at a certain age where we're dealing with cast iron sewer lateral lines, you should always consider our sewer scope. I can't even tell you how many times I've done sewer scopes and I've come across offsets. And an offset is basically when the pipe does not line up correctly. And there's like a little bump in the middle of the line, halfway down the line to the city tap. And then you're wondering why you're getting backed up, because the toilet paper, the wipes, and by the way, never throw wipes down a sewer line, get caught up. We see cracks all the time, hairline cracks, and we see a lot of bellies. Bellies are basically built up of water in the middle of the sewer line. These are all defects, but not all defects need to be corrected. Now, if you have a severe crack in your sewer line, yes, it needs to be replaced. But if you have a belly, it's actually pretty common. Until you start seeing it back up through your toilet, back through your sinks, it's okay. Is it recommended to be fixed? Yes. But to refix it, you're looking at $300 a foot. To replace it, you're probably looking $8,000 to $12,000, depending on the length. So it's definitely a peace of mind. It's definitely worth spending the extra money, which is always discounted for a sewer line while you're out in the field, to get it done, because that could be very costly at the end of the day down the road, 6 months down the road. And now there are companies out there that you actually can get insurance for these sewer lines, etc. But we all know how that goes. When the time comes to put a claim in, they fight you tooth and nail. Then next thing you know, you have to get an adjuster, and it just becomes a pain in the neck. So better to avoid it, basically, by getting the inspection with the sewer line as a buyer. Now, as a seller, I have to admit, most of my inspections are with buyers, but I have done for sellers as well. As a seller, at the end of the day, you want to get to the closing table. You want to sell your house. You want to move on. You want to get your cash on hand. And same goes for your listing agent, your agent. So what better way is to know what defects you have in your property before you list it? Okay. So what do? You order your home inspection. Maybe you don't need to do the sewer and all that stuff, but you definitely want to get the home inspection because there are going to be defects when you go list your house. And when the buyer does their inspection on your house, the best thing that you want is to have a home inspection that's very limited, very little narratives, defects. The less for you, the better as a seller, and as a buyer as well. So prior to listing your home, why not get inspection? Have them come and check all the receptacles. Make sure everything is GFI protected. That needs to be GFI, which means everything in the basement, at least one receptacle. In the garage, at least one receptacle. Everything within 6 feet of water, everything in the laundry room needs to be GFI protected. You'll have that on your report, so you can hire your electrician to take care of these items prior to the buyer doing their inspection. So guess what? So when you get a request list from the buyer for repairs, those items won't be on there. Why don't you, another reason, loose toilet. That's easy fix. I can do that myself, tighten it up. That won't come up on an inspection report. So you're going, by doing an inspection prior to a list, you're going to know in advance a lot of the defects that would come up normally during a buyer inspection. So it's good to know in advance, take care of those items. That way, when the buyer does their inspection, and you know they will, they'll be entitled to do it, you won't have a significant report to address. And that way, it'll make your job as selling the house and your agent's job of listing and selling it a lot easier to negotiate and get to the closing table. At the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, is to get to the closing table as smoothly as possible. So that being said, any questions?
Well, I just had one. How close is, well, let me preface this. In many townships in the state of New Jersey, an inspection is required in order for you to get what's called a certificate of occupancy. That's what you need in order usually to sell your house. How close is your inspection to those inspections, or isn't there any data on that?
Well, it's actually pretty close. As home inspectors, we're not code enforcers, but
Right.
we do know what townships look for
Right.
from going out. One example, well, couple examples would be obviously smoke detectors and carbon monoxide need to be outside the bedroom or inside the bedrooms itself, either hallway or the bedrooms. In my reports, by default, that is always going to be checked off, period, by default. Another item that always comes up is going to be railings to the basement with balusters. I can't even tell you how many times I've done basements walking down and there's no railing. There's not even balusters, where a child can easily fall down,
Right.
and hurt themselves. That'll come up. As far as the exterior goes, cracked driveways, lifted sidewalks, they will always come up 9 out of 10 times, 10 out of 10 times. And most of the times you won't be able to get homeowners insurance because of that either. Because right now, as far as insurance companies goes, they're starting to crack down. They're actually driving by these homes before they issue these policies.
Wow. Okay.
These are a lot of things that come up. And most importantly, when I also do the inspections, if I see a new furnace or a new AC or a new hot water tank and I don't have any evidence of permits pulled, that will come up.
Right.
And I can tell
Right.
you in my reports, if I see a new hot water tank that was recently put in about 2 years ago, and I see no expansion tank, which is code actually, and like I said, we're not code enforcement, but that's required, and I don't see a permit sticker on there, it's a red flag for me. Okay, that means somebody put this tank in here who happened to be a plumber, but did not want to go the extra step and pull the permits. Most people don't like to deal with townships because they could be a little bit of a headache. Depends who you're dealing with.
Right.
But what happens is if you cut corners like that,
Yep.
it's going to come back to bite you. That's what's going to happen. Take it from experience. That happened to me a few years ago when I sold my townhouse. I had installed a hot water tank and the guy did a great job, saved me a lot of money. I'm like, I'm not selling this house. Well, guess what? The market was really hot right before COVID. I was getting good money for it. I went to go sell it. I got a cash offer. I had to get my CEO, and guess what? He nailed me. So
Right.
it
Right.
actually cost me double than what it would have cost me if I would have done it right the first time.
Right.
And you don't want that. So
Right.
as inspectors, we are very similar to what they look for. We know what they look for, and we try to point them out in advance.
Right. That's very
So
good. That's
yeah,
very
so
good. Yeah.
kind of, I mean, you may get an inspector here that could be a stickler and ask for like everything in the kitchen sink, but we can't control that. At the end of the day, the township's also looking out for the new buyer's safety as well, just like
Yeah.
we are. We're like safety enforcers pretty much. Like even like if you have a deck in the back of the house and there's no permits for that, they're going to look up the record of the house and see about permits. That's the first thing they do before they even go out. They see if there's any permits and they see if there's anything open or outstanding. Like I said, I'm a broker. I'm selling a house in Voorhees, and they have a pool, above ground pool. He pulled the permits. He did it right, but guess what? He never closed it. So now we have them coming out next week, actually in 2 days, to close the permit. Hopefully everything's good. But he did not know. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But the township is here to do their job, and they want to make sure the safety, everybody's safe. Because if they're not, and God forbid somebody gets hurt, guess what? We're all going to be sued, and
Right.
nobody wants that.
Right.
So to
Exactly.
answer your question, we are very similar to that. We point out what they usually look for.
Right.
Uh, Again, every township is different. Willingboro's example is one that they do require a sewer scope for a CO inspection. Unfortunately, that needs to be a licensed plumber. I'm not a licensed plumber. I'm just certified to do sewer scopes. So we come very close to what they look for at the end of the day.
Good. Good. Good.
Questions?
Thanks a lot.
That's good. That's good information because yeah, different townships can be difficult.
Yeah, they're definitely difficult, but they all mean well at the end of the day. They all mean well. You'll be surprised, a lot of houses that I do are not in the greatest shape, and you have to be extra cautious when you're doing these inspections because, the last thing I want is somebody to come in there with children and, something happens, carbon monoxide, who knows? It could be anything, and I don't want that phone call in the middle of the night. I don't want that. So my reports are very educational, very extensive. There's a lot of good information, and clients like it. And I can see it. The reviews on Google and all that. They're thorough. They appreciate it. And at the end of the day, I'm looking out for them. I'm like they're one of their line of defense, just like the realtor is as well, just in a different aspect of it.
Yeah. Great. Great.
Thanks a lot,
Great. Thank you so
Angelos.
much.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Now we have the cleanup batter, Vera McCoy, Esquire, with Financial First Aid. Take it away.
Thank you, Hector, and thank you, all the other panelists for being on today. I think you guys are giving the first-time home buyers and sellers some really good, relevant information. I just want to touch on a couple of things that Hector asked me to discuss. and one of them is inherited properties. Inherited properties come with a plethora of issues. One, it could be the issue that Angelus was talking about a few minutes ago, where, and Hector, I think, touched on it as well, where the property is an older property. And because it's an older property, you don't know all of the defects. And most certainly, the seller, the new seller, who is the person who's inherited the property, doesn't know what's going on in the property. So in inherited situations, it's always a good thing to get an inspection. It's always a good thing to have a realtor on your side to help you navigate that whole process. But how does the whole inherited process work? Many times people don't understand that a good idea is to have things set in place before, of course, your demise. Some people find that very nerve-wracking and scary because they don't really want to talk about death, but death is inevitable. We're all going to go. So the best, I think, line of defense is try very hard to set things up and put things in place so that your children don't have to go through a whole bunch of red tape and processes that they A are unfamiliar with, and B, because they're in a maybe not in the best state of mind, because many times people are grieving over their lost one, they don't always have the tools that they need to move forward in order for them to deal with an inherited property. So I've had some really interesting stories these last about 2 years that I've had to deal with. One of which was the child. Well, no, I shouldn't say the child. The person who inherited the property actually inherited a property that was she was supposed to be the executor of the estate. And the person who died had great planning, a great planning setup. They had a will, they had everything in place. The one piece of the puzzle that they didn't have was the property was previously owned by the mother and grandmother of the person who, I'm sorry, the grand aunt and the grandmother of the person who inherited the property. They never knew about or never thought about when the grandmother died, it should have been transferred to the living child because the child was still alive. But the child didn't think that. So the child was the one that had done a great job with her will, explaining that she needed her niece to be the person that was responsible for handling the estate. But for there never being a transfer of the decedent's property from the deceased mother to the person who actually owned the property, there was a stop on the sale. The surrogate's office had to make sure that everything was in place before the sale could take place. So these are things that people don't think about. I also had the same situation with another person who didn't have a will. The grandmother and mother owned the house. The son inherited the house, but he didn't get everybody because she didn't have a will. He didn't have everybody sign off on the house. Come full circle, the mother had actually been married and the deceased person's husband didn't sign off on the transfer. We had to put a stop on the sale there and go through the whole process of probate and deal with the surrogate's office in order for the sale to go through. So, just a word of caution when you are dealing with inherited properties, the best thing to do is really try to sit down and have a discussion of the people who are going to be the heirs prior to the actual person being deceased, and try to get those affairs in order if you can. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to have that discussion with people, but as the property owner should try to make sure that you can get everything in order. So it's just a really smooth transition for the people who are going to be inheriting the property. Of course, we can't cover everything and think of every eventuality, but some things are just very, very apparent. And one of the apparent things is trying to make sure that the succession of transfer is all set in place so that when the person is deceased, you don't have to go through that whole problem or the whole ordeal of dealing with the surrogate's office and dealing with probate. Another way you can make sure that the transition from you as the child who's going to inherit and the parent is you can always have the property transferred to the children, the living children, if there's more than one, in such a way where the property is transferred to the children and the living parent, and the living parent would keep what's called a life estate. If that's done, then the children, because sometimes the parents get nervous, they don't want their child to, take the property from under them and not be able for them to continue to live in the property. They, by doing it with a life estate, you're protecting the parent and you're also making it easier when the person deceases for the children to be the owners. Then at that point in time, the children don't have to really deal with inheritance tax because they are not inheriting the property at that point. They're actually already the owners. And it protects the parent who's deceased because the parent doesn't have to be concerned with their children putting them out of the house. They can't do anything until the parent dies. It becomes a little bit more involved in that, but that's a real quick, basic way to make sure that you can protect not only the parent, but you can also protect the heirs who are going to inherit the property. It's always a good idea to have a power of attorney. Too, power of attorney will help protect the person who's the owner if in the event they become uh, mentally disabled in some kind of way, if they start to deal with dementia issues or if they start becoming forgetful and those kinds of things, it's always good to try to have at least one of your children or maybe more of your children working with you as you get older, just to make sure that things are going to be very, very easy if in fact you do inherit the property. For example, there's situations where, a person I had one last year where the person had owned the property for years and actually the mortgage had been paid in full. And with the mortgage being paid in full, the children never thought much about anything having to be paid in terms of a mortgage. But the parent had actually taken out um, a home equity line of credit, and then the person found out that they inherited the property. Then they found out that there was a foreclosure action. Well, there was a foreclosure action because after the person died, no one was paying the mortgage, no one was paying that home equity loan. So we had to kind of rush and get things in order, put a stop on the foreclosure, get that in order, and then the inherited child had to hurry up and sell the property so that they wouldn't lose that money from the foreclosure. And that was just a home equity line of credit. It wasn't even technically it wasn't a mortgage, but it was a line of credit. Um, it's always good for you to have this conversation about the property if you can with your child, if you're an older person, and you should help the heirs in terms of, maybe telling them who your accountant is, who your attorney is, who your financial advisor is. These are all things that people really don't think about, and their only real asset is their home. And you want to try to protect it because some people don't want to sell the family home, so to speak. They do want to keep it as an inheritance and as a legacy to their children and their grandchildren and so on and so forth. So try to have that discussion and have your child know who's the accountant, who's the attorney, who's the financial, who are the people that are going to be dealing with your assets before you, after you die, but tell that, to your children ahead of time before you die so that they know who to go to and have this discussion with. Um, the only other thing I think Hector wanted me to talk about was if you inherit a property and it's an investment property and you have a tenant, what are the obligations? In New Jersey, the state of New Jersey is very tenant friendly, and so that can create a whole a whole bunch of problems for the child who's going to be inheriting the property. But the best thing I think to do is to really have a discussion with the tenant, explain to the tenant what's going on in this situation, and then let let you as the inherited person decide how you want to move forward. You have to, of course, give them notice with everything you do with a tenant in New Jersey. You have to always give a notice about what it is you're getting ready to do. So if you're going to sell it and you're not going to keep the tenant in there, you have to give them notice. You can't just kick them out. Same thing with even a mortgage. When an inherited property or a tenant occupied property is going through a foreclosure, you can't just kick them out. Mortgage companies have to go through a whole set of regulations and rules before they can actually put you out. But I would strongly encourage you, if you do inherit a property that is an investment property and you have tenants, especially in the state of New Jersey, you really should get an attorney to, and I'm not tooting my own horn, I'm just saying in general, you should get an attorney to help you deal with that and navigate that whole process. So that's all that I have, Hector. If there's anything you'd like to ask, any questions, I'm more than open to try to answer them anyway.
Yeah, Vera, I have one.
Sure.
Just when you're talking about the life estate, what's the difference between that or setting up a trust, and what are the differences? What's the benefits to each?
Okay. Setting up a trust, I think, is well, let's put it this way. I think it's more beneficial if you have more assets, but you can actually just have your one asset, which is your home, and you set it up in a trust. And the trust generally will protect you, or I shouldn't say maybe protect you as much as it'll protect the people who are inheriting the property. Understand with the trust, that also will help you avoid dealing with probate. Because if there's a trust, the people who are actually going to benefit from the trust are the beneficiaries. And the trustees are the people who control the trust. So they will control the asset. The beneficiaries will actually be the people who will benefit from the asset. The difference between a life estate and a trust is, like I said, generally people have more assets when they set up a trust. But if they have just the one asset, doing it with a life estate just makes it, I guess, cleaner and easier to deal with in terms of once the person deceases. When you're dealing with the trust, there could be a couple of layers that you have to deal with and go through, as opposed to if you set it up with a life estate, there's nothing else that has to be done. It just automatically will be become the property of the different heirs, the children of the person who's doing the life estate. That's the basic answer.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. I'm going to close it up. I'm going to share my last my last screen,
Hmm.
just so anyone in the past, present, and future can get all. Thank you, everyone, for being on time and giving your part. So here's everyone's information. I'm also going to be sending out an email to anyone that did register. So there'll be two ways for everyone to receive the contact information. Everyone see it?
Yes, thank you.
So I'll close us out. Once again, thank you guys. Um, let's do it again sometime, or Instagram live, Matt. Um, thank you
Thank you.
guys for everything. Enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of your day.
Thank you,
Thank you
Hector, for
too.
having
My
me.
pleasure.
I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.